exam. So it turns out I was actually able to finish one more book this year. I Have Some Questions for You by Rebecca Makkai. I had heard about this book from a few different places, and I don't know that I ever really intended to read it, except that I saw it. It was at the Kauai Writers Conference. I think the author was maybe a presenter. I didn't see her listed on the schedule for the conference proper, but I think maybe she did one of the master classes that they do before the weekend conference. So I read the flap. It wasn't a flap, it was a paperback, so I guess it was the back of the book. And I was like, okay. Because I had heard people either really liked this book or really didn't. The story is set, the first part is set in 2018. We are told it from the point of view of the main character, who is seemingly writing a letter. I can't tell if she's writing a letter or a journal entry to a teacher she had in high school. So this character, her name is Bodie Kane. Her real name is Elizabeth, but she goes by Bodie because her brother apparently couldn't say her name when they were little or something. And she grew up in Indiana, but for high school went to a boarding school in New Hampshire called Granby. She was kind of sponsored by this Mormon family because she did not come from money, so she never had like the coolest clothes or anything. She was overweight. She didn't fit in. She made a couple of really good friends there, but that was about it. Her senior year, which was the year 1995, one of her classmates was murdered. And they convicted a guy, like the athletic director, this black guy, I think his name is Omar. Meanwhile, Bodie, now, grown up, 2 kids of her own, estranged from her husband, who is an artist. She gets asked back for a mini-mester, that kind of short term, but I think between fall and spring courses. It's usually 2 or 3 weeks, right? To teach podcasting and a film class. So she goes back to Granby to do this, and one of her students chooses to do a true crime podcast on her Bodie's classmate. Her name is, I want to say Talia, but it sounded in the book like maybe it was Thalia. I don't know. This girl's murder, because the student is convinced that the wrong guy was convicted. There have been lots of online campaigns, in the way that true crime is, lots of YouTubers picking apart the thing, Redditors, that kind of thing. So Bodie gets involved in part because she was there. She was, a primary source. And all of this eventually leads to, in 2022, new hearings. The Innocence Project gets involved, that kind of thing. So Bodie is writing, this would have been a hell of a letter to receive. It's 435 pages. And there's a lot more going on. Like, Bodie's estranged husband is Me Too'd on Twitter by an artist, a performance artist, who said that when she was 21 and he was like in his 30s, he groomed her, or was like, she had a toxic relationship with him, and that's on him, and that kind of thing. And so we're looking at a lot of topics. We're looking at the way true crime media handles the topics and the victims, fetishizing versus, and we're talking about women. Are they empowered? Are they infantilized? What, without there ever really being an answer, because there isn't an answer. It's that those are complicated topics, but it's dug around in a lot without there ever really being even, you would think the character would come to at least some kind of even uneasy conclusion, but I really didn't feel like she ever did. And of course, the ending to all this is telegraphed, but still somewhat unsatisfying. And the solution also underwhelming to some degree. I gave it 3.5 stars, and I left it at 3 on Goodreads. I just couldn't quite bring myself to round up to 4. I liked it. It definitely, dragged in places. It was definitely probably longer than it needed to be. The topics that are kind of dealt with they're good ones. They're ones that interest me. I watch a lot of true crime YouTube stuff. I'm interested in that stuff. But I'm also very aware that the way this stuff is presented is often, if not problematic, I mean, there are biases, there are angles. That's journalism for you. So there's that. There is kind of the cancel culture slant. When is it too much, too far? When are we, do you really decide to cut somebody out of society based on one mistake or misapprehension? These are discussions worth having. A lot of people just said they didn't like the writing. I think it's more that none of the characters in this are, I don't know. First of all, there are so many of them because they have all these classmates that have to come back as witnesses and things. And then there's the students that Bodhi is teaching. So there's a lot of names and people and things, a lot of information, and it feels like a lot. And so I didn't feel like we ever got to know anybody really well except Bodhi. And I don't love her as a character. I mean, she is, I guess, very human, but extremely flawed in ways I couldn't relate to, and I couldn't really enjoy or even fully, some of the decisions she makes are why, just would any reasonable person, even somebody in the headspace she's in as she's writing and explaining herself, would they really, is kind of the question. So, and you're stuck in her head and with her thoughts the whole time. If you can't tolerate it, you may not like it, but if you can't even tolerate it, you're not going to get very far. And there's not a lot of external characters that are going to shore it up, or you can't transfer your support to somebody else because you get just little slivers of other people. There's one student, Alder, who's just very effervescent, I want to say, ebullient, and he's a lot. You could kind of like him, maybe. When I read about him, he's kind of exhausting. As somebody who has taught summer camps, I'm just like, oh, that kid. He, you gotta love them, but at the same time, you're just like, oh my God, he's constantly texting. One of those. So, but for the most part, it's just, there's a classmate of Bodhi's named Jeff, who she talks about a lot in her memories, and we do finally see him when we skip ahead to 2022, and he's very likable, but we get so very little of him aside from in Bodhi's flashbacks that, I mean, I would have liked more of him. He's probably the character I most liked, but I mean, maybe if he'd been on the page more, he'd have gotten annoying too. I don't know. So anyway, yeah, it was fine. Like I said, 3.5 stars, which I actually rounded down to 3. So this was my 48th book of the year. Goodreads says I read 49 books this year. I did not. It was counting a book that I had taken off my shelf. I don't know why it was still counting it. So some of its numbers are off for the year because of that. But And now I am reading Destroy This House by Amanda, again, Uli? I don't know how to say it. I need to look it up. If you know, like, give me a pronunciation in the comments. And I'm supposed to pick up a library book, The Tainted Cup. A lot of people have talked about this one. From what I've heard, I can't tell if it's going to be my thing. People say, oh, it's a Sherlock and Watson thing, and I do like Sherlock Holmes. So maybe, but then it sounds like the magic systems and stuff may be complicated. I don't like books that make me work too hard, so I don't know. We'll see. I'll look at it, and I may or may not actually get through it. But anyway, that's it for now. That's probably really is it for 2025 now, and I will see you in the new year. Until next time, take care.